The October State Board work session will now come to order. Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Here.
Patrick McPherson.
Here.
Glenn Flint.
Here.
Lily Larson.
Present.
Molly O'Halloran.
Present.
John Witzel.
Here.
Commissioner Bloomsday.
Present.
All present.
Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. Board members, please remember to engage your microphones when you're speaking and turn them off when you are finished, and please turn off personal cell phones. Moving on to item 2, board reports, dates, and discussion items. This is really talking about where we have been since our September meeting. Would anyone, John, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's been a good active month in regards to starting out with a visit to the Nebraska Children Changemakers Conference in La Vista. It was a very good conference. Thank you very much. I was invited to lunch by Jen Gottenmueller and Andrew Monson of First 5 Nebraska, where we discussed early childhood education and discussed some other items that are affecting their operation. I was invited to the Northwest Magnet High School by Principal Thomas Lee of the Omaha Public Schools with Mark Evans, and Principal Lee is doing remarkable things at Northwest High in regards to graduation rates and more opportunities for our students, but that a new enthusiasm is taking spark in the school, and it was really refreshing to see. Had a quarterly meeting with Dr. Andy Rickley at the Papillion La Vista School District, where we discussed, if you will, current events, issues, and so forth. Also, with other board members and other individuals of NDE, we attended the Career Technical Education Stakeholder Conference with Rich, Corey, and Carol. It was a very, very outstanding conference. Community engagement, stakeholder participation with many in the community. So thank you very much. Thanks, Corey. I was invited by Patrick Slattery to the Catholic Archbishop's Dinner of Education. It was over 1,000 people were, in regards to their organization, they recognized their best of the teachers and administrators. UNO for Collective Youth Lights After program, over 1,300 young people participated in a day event in regards to mentoring and, if you will, other activities after school. Vocational Rehab Conference, Mark Schultz gave an excellent presentation at the beginning, and what was very, very unusual or very enlightening and one to remember was his speech on good luck and bad luck, whatever. If you would see him, I'd ask about it. It was very, very good. I was invited to the National Coalition of 100 Black Women of Omaha, their leadership conference. Courtney Phillips from HHS was the featured speaker, and thank you very much, National Coalition. I greatly appreciate it. And lastly, I had the opportunity to meet with Jerry Bexton from the Sherwood Foundation yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else want to report out? Maureen?
On the 14th of September, I attended the Nebraska School Board's regional meeting in York at the Holtis Center. And it was really good for me because I was able to connect with a lot of my schools within my district of local board members and administrators as well. The first part of the evening was a general session with everyone at round tables, and it was about creating a vision for Nebraska's future, knowing that Nebraska is land rich and people poor, all about school aid money and what are we going to be doing about taxes. That's going to be heavy on the legislative agenda. And what was really good for me is I'm a very visual, hands-on person, and the handout, which has coffee all over it, mind you, it shared, if you've been to one of these meetings, it shows how over the last 20 years, the percent of the state budget for education has gone down dramatically from the 0% line. And yet the corrections, Medicaid and child welfare have risen in cost. And as they talked about, you know, it really should be the other way around, the funding going up for those in education. So it was just a very enlightening hour, 90 minutes, where we sat around as a table group to discuss what we thought might be some things for the future to compile together. And Molly, I think you've been to a couple of them. They'll compile all of our thoughts and ideas and present those to the legislature in some type of format. The other part was that as I sat around the table listening to, there were 4 different school districts represented at my table. Every community and every school district has their own culture. So it's always interesting to see how the discussions unfold around the tax issues and who's land rich and people poor, and whose, you know, land is kind of not so rich but more people. But it was interesting. I attended a breakout session called What's Required for Schools, and 2 presenters from the School Boards Association did an excellent job in sharing the new policy regulations by the federal government and the new safety standards that have been put into place. One of them being what's required in school safety that we've all discussed here on the board. Another one was on the new suicide awareness training that goes on. And I learned a lot from that, never having sat in on one of those sessions before, so that was really good for me. And then there was just a piece on a required insurance measure that the districts have to complete annually. But it was a very well attended session, good questions answered, and actually not enough time in the session. So I really appreciated the opportunity to attend.
Molly? Thank you, Maureen.
I won't repeat anything that's already been, oh, is that on? I have a short. I'll scoot over. I have a, apologize. Sorry. If I bring my computer, it probably won't get over there all the way. First of all, I went to the Nebraska Medical Association Communication and Leadership Annual Meeting. And it was very interesting because they had a session that talked about obesity in our children and what we can do as schools and as parents to decrease the likelihood of increasing obesity. And I told some of my colleagues earlier today, the biggest factor is sugary beverages. And that kind of surprised me. But when you see people with those big gulps, there's like a cup of sugar in that. And if you are addicted to the sugary drinks, it will impact your waistline and weight. There was also a special session on the opioid epidemic. And I know we deal with K-12 and we don't really think about it being an issue for our students. But I really do believe education is the best thing we can do to help people realize if they have accidents or need pain medication, the sooner they can get off the medication, the earlier. And also our parents, if they've had operations, they really should make sure that they get their opioids out of the medicine cabinet if they're no longer going to use them. And I do want to say the Nebraska Medical Association physicians and nurse practitioners and physician assistants in your communities are very happy to do outreach and education in your school districts. The second meeting I went to is the NASB area membership meeting, and it was in North Platte, so there's no, no expense involved. It was kind of cool, 5 minutes door to door. And I will add to Maureen's comment, when we went through the school safety standard, I emphasized on the section that we've added an emphasis on digital citizenship. And I really do believe we as boards see sometimes digital citizenship gone awry. And so I just re-emphasized to my member districts that make sure you talk with your teachers and your students about digital literacy and citizenship. Then I'd like to go on to the NASB area membership, also in North Platte, so it's just down the road. And I really think it is neat to listen to other school board members that are on the local level to understand what it's like to sit in their chairs. And I know Lily keeps close in touch with Lincoln Public School Board. I do want to report that our colleagues seem to be still learning about AQuest. So Matt, please keep the education up, because I think for some of the new board members that'll be coming on in January, AQuest probably should have a little blast out to all the NASB board members. And then I also went to Career Tech Education Stakeholder Engagement Group in North Platte. No expense involved. And the stakeholder engagement run by Carol Ringenberg and Rich Cott was awesome. We sat around with people in business and industry and schools, and the man that had a cement company said it's so difficult to get skilled workers to drive the cement trucks and then to understand the complexity of creating cement. So he said they have more positions than are fillable. So Western Nebraska, if you're interested in cement or driving trucks, talk to me. I'll get you in touch with this gentleman. The next one is Vocational Rehabilitation State Staff Conference, and oh my gosh, he is not sitting there, Mark. I don't know where Mark is, but oh, he's gone. He's in another meeting. Oh, he's busy. Well, anyway, I have to tell you, I learned so much about vocational rehabilitation, and Matt, your staff is awesome. And you were funny too. But your staff has a great sense of humor, and vocational rehabilitation being part of our conversation made me just so excited that our strategic plan is really involving the vocational rehab folks. One thing I would report out on VR is, again, pardon me for not knowing more than I do, but I really do believe that it is so important that those students in K-12 education that are using vocational rehab understand they need to have a plan, because if they transition out between an 18 and 19, it's hard for them to get their support back. And the parents shouldn't be afraid of filing what support they are receiving. And Easter Seals did a great job with the benefits package. I love Project Search, and I hope it expands. And I'm sorry, I probably talked too much. Bye.
Okay, any more? Lily, and then Pat?
Pat, oh, go ahead.
No, Lily, go ahead.
Okay. My report is not about Lincoln schools or Nebraska schools or U.S. schools or visiting group, but rather having visited school in Macedonia just last week. And whenever my husband and I travel internationally, I always visit some schools. And one thing, and here's the message that I think is so important, the children there do not have the obesity problem. And I think it's because of the type of work that the children do around the home and so on. But we're getting to that. We're making advances. But a question I had for them, what about the foreign languages among the children in this elementary building? They start English in 3rd grade. And I think it's a message to us to rethink the importance of foreign languages in our schools, because I think that we need to work with the world, and if we're better informed with their languages, it's to our advantage and makes for good relations. So, thank you.
I'll just be brief. I participated in 3 webinars over the last month, with 2 sponsored by NSABE, and one on social justice, which I thought was really interesting, and talked about the pipeline of impoverished, socioeconomically disadvantaged folks to jail, and how certain cities and districts are dealing with that issue to try to put something in between that pipeline to get these kids a different chance or opportunity. I did get to see attended an event that sponsored by Bellevue University at Joslin a couple weeks ago, and Newt Gingrich was speaker, and he had some interesting things to say on education, as he always does. And like most of you, I attended the stakeholder engagement meeting and the VR staff conference yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, I'll just add, I feel like just after everyone, I just go ditto, ditto, check, check. So again, NASB Regional Conference in Norfolk, and I think they have a very consistent pattern and process throughout. I think the upcoming Omaha meeting is next week. But again, I think it's a great opportunity to intersect with our school districts in our region and our local board members and administrators. The CTE, stakeholder engagement, I've been able to attend 2 of those, and again, I think it's a great way to start looking at how current technical education and the Department of Education is really starting to gather input for the reauthorization of the hopeful upcoming reauthorization of the Perkins legislation, and kind of some direction and vision that's happening through that process. Also, several of us attended the Nebraska Children and Family Change Makers Luncheon, and again, that was an outstanding opportunity to intersect with our community partners across the state, and a great presentation by Victor Rios. Did I get the last name? All of a sudden it's gone. To really put the perspective of domestic violence and how that impacts a child and impacts a child developmentally, and there's some very good food for thought as a part of that particular luncheon. Again, the Voc Rehab Conference was outstanding as well, and it was great. I think they hold it every other year, and so I would encourage everyone to attend in 2 years to get a sense of how the interconnections between vocational rehabilitation and the services provided for students with disabilities happens, and the great work that's done with VR. It was great to be able to attend there. Just a couple other pieces that were more local I'd like to highlight. We have a 10-school collaborative that ESU2 is helping to coordinate around current technical education, and it started with part of the revisioning process, and this year they've got one of their first pieces that they're implementing is a shared program that I think there were 6 school districts from that 10-school collaborative that are sending students, and they're using a school in Beamer that is no longer serving students. They're using that school as a shared joint site for the Project Lead the Way computer science program, and they have 2 sessions of that, a morning and afternoon session. And I was able to stop by and see that collaborative, which I think is an example, again, how we need to think innovatively and creatively about serving students in rural parts of the state. And then I just need to give a shout out to Bancroft Rosalie. I was able to attend their musical, which was Dorothy in Wonderland last weekend, and it's great again to see that the fine arts are important parts of our schools, small schools and large schools. So those are a few of the things that I've been involved with in the past month. Anything else? If not, we will move on to item 2, and that's discuss requests for meetings. We've got in your e-meetings information the requests that have been coming in, so please, if you've got some upcoming requests, make sure you get those in. I know particularly in November, we will have the state conference, the NASB NCSA state conference, and some have signed up for that already, but make sure you think about that for November. Item 3, you've got your monthly board travel expense report is also in your e-meetings to review, and you may want to take a look at that before tomorrow, and we will act on the requests tomorrow. Moving on to item 3 is the Commissioner's Report and Agenda Overview. And the first item in that area is to talk about some changes that are happening. As you know, last month we started some changes in the structure of our agenda, and this month we're continuing to expand that change in those structures, and the Commissioner will be talking a little bit about that. At this meeting today, if the changes have streamlined processes, we may actually be finished a little early. If that happens, the intent is in the streamlining process, we may be able to build more time for presentations during our work session that help us continue to build our background information. Tomorrow, you'll notice in the agenda, since we did not have hearings as well, the commissioners added a presentation there that he'll talk just a little bit about. So I will turn it over to the commissioner to talk about the agenda and some of the changes that are underway. Commissioner.
Yeah, and thank you for kind of adapting to change all the time. I think it's part of our kind of continuous improvement process, I would say, in the function of the board, but also in the function of how staff prepare for board meetings and how we go about ensuring that we can get all this information organized for you to make well-informed decisions and be able to move through that process. I'm going to have Dr. Friesen come up. I've got to thank Dr. Friesen, Deputy Halstead, probably all the deputies, come to think of it, have been involved in conversations about how we really make that process work, and informing not just you on that, how that process works, but actually our staff. And I can tell you, I can maybe joke a little bit. We have these conversations in deputies meetings, and I left for a couple days, and I came back and I went, oh, this is what we're doing. So if you're shocked by it, I had moments in time where I was also, but actually very pleased. So Dr. Friesen is going to walk us through that process, but I want you to know this is the same process that we have for staff as we have for you. The intention is that everyone knows essentially what their roles are in the various meetings, and Dr. Friesen does a nice job of walking us all through that. So I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Commissioner, but Board, let me put a slightly different twist on it. The Commissioner did task the deputies with getting it together, so to speak, and towards that we brought in Dr. Ryan Four, to meet with us to review, because our task was to review the protocol and the guidelines for staff workflow and regarding the state board meetings. Staff, we were doing different things in the meetings, and sometimes requiring meetings to be a little bit more laborious than they needed to be, because we didn't necessarily all consistently follow protocol. And so with Ryan's help, we put together what looks like two documents, but it's actually the same. In front of you, you may have the one, we hope, that's highlighted in green. And the only difference between that and the one highlighted in blue is that for staff, it's highlighted in blue because everything that says staff is pointed out in blue. And for your sake, everything that's highlighted in green has to do with the board. And so it's divided into 5 sections. And I'm going to go through, for your sake, each section to point that out. The first section is prior to the board planning meeting. The second section is before the board committee meetings. The third is during the board committee meetings. The fourth is during the work session. And the fifth is during the board meeting. There's probably absolutely nothing new in this document in regards to how a board meeting or work session or a committee meeting should ever run or has run. It's just a matter of getting it on paper for our sake so that we have a reference point for all of us. So if you're with me, I'm going to start at number 1, and I'm just going to read it through, sometimes in some cases as fast as I can. Number 1. Staff submit action and discussion items to e-meetings by Thursday before board planning meetings, and we've asked the staff to let's try to push this back earlier. There are 2 parts to that. A, designate to appropriate committee per guidance provided in an attached document. And at some time, Donlin says that Laura also helped, so thank you to that. Put together a process for requesting agenda items, and that's for staff to assist them in how to put information into e-meetings. Staff making presentations to the committee should begin uploading presentation materials and supplemental materials to e-meetings. 2, committee staff leads refer to agenda developed in e-meetings and consults with committee staff and other staff to mutually determine the time allotted for each agenda item. See attached document for list of board committee members and committee staff leads. And I think maybe about the 3rd, 4th, 5th page, you'll see a list of the standing committees and the ad hoc committees there. The assigned deputy commissioner will follow up with individuals making presentations to committees as deemed necessary to review materials that will be presented to board members and the public. This step will continue up to the time of the committee meeting as needed. We put that there just so that staff was reminded that deputy commissioners were responsible for being as helpful as they could to what the presentation materials would be for your sake. committee meeting agenda is reviewed at board planning meeting. This has been our regular practice. Now we're at before the board committee meetings. All presentation materials and supplemental materials must be uploaded to e-meetings for board member review by the Monday prior to or 3 days before, whichever is less, the committee meeting. Edits only, this was important for staff, to the materials are accepted up to 24 hours before the start of the committee meeting upon consultation with board committee chair and assigned deputy commissioner. Change must be uploaded to e-meetings. That's for the sake that if we see anything misspelled we want to correct, that would be the case. Adding any new material, not permissible. Edits only, of course, because everything would want it to be in its best form. During board committee meetings, staff tenant work groups, domains only, will continue to meet as needed. Tenants no longer meet as board committees. All information is shared with entire domain committees. As you know, board members are still assigned to tenants, bringing whatever those information items to their committee chair to get on to the agenda. Staff are still meeting in tenant groups so that we can have greater cross-collaboration across the agency, but as board committees, just that little nuance has changed. Additions to the agenda will not be accepted at the meeting. When board members have additional topics for discussion, they may confer with the board committee chair to add the item to the agenda for the next committee meeting. The board committee chair will preside over the committee meeting. The committee staff lead will designate a staff member to take notes in e-meetings. Staff are reminded that this is a committee meeting of board members. Staff are present to inform board committee members on action items and discussion items as an agent of the commissioner. For action items, board committee members, deputy commissioners, and the commissioner will determine the format of staff presentations for the board work session. Board committee chair determines if there is consensus from the committee, i.e. for a recommendation, to be communicated in the board work session. The purpose is to summarize the conversation from the committee meeting for the other board members. Ideally, action items are presented to the committee as discussion items at least 1 month before the intended date of a motion and vote. B, for discussion items, staff informs board committee members how the information is related to a future action item, for example, will be on the agenda at next month's meeting, or informing the committee of practice as it relates to a policy decision. Board committee members, deputy commissioners, and the commissioner will determine the format of staff presentations for the work session. 1, generally, only items related to action items or future action items are shared in the work session. Number 11, committee staff leads prepare an outline of discussion points for board committee chairs to deliver in the work session. During the work session, at the time of the committee report, the board president will yield to the board committee chair, who will deliver a summary report of action and discussion items, relaying recommendations as appropriate. Board committee chair will call on other board members or staff to provide further information on items as necessary and as determined in the committee meeting. Information related to action items needs to be shared with the full board before a vote is taken at the board meeting. After staff presentations and the committee report, the board committee chair will ask if there are board member questions. The board committee chair will ask staff to respond to questions when necessary. After the committee report and questions, the board committee chair will yield back to the board president. Committee staff leads are always present during committee reports. Committee staff are present as necessary during committee reports. And during the board meeting. Yes.
National Weather Service has issued a tornado watch for Lancaster County. This includes the city of Lincoln until 9 p.m. tonight. Have your attention, please. The National Weather Service has issued a tornado watch for Lancaster County and including the city of Lincoln until 9 p.m. Thank you.
Hurry, Dorothy. During the board meeting for action items, committee staff leads are always present during relevant agenda items. Committee staff are present as necessary during relevant agenda items. And B, ideally, the board committee chair or other board committee members will make the motion. I think you may have attached, Denise, help me on this one, something called e-meetings? No. What do they have attached?
They have the committee.
Just the committee? Yeah, that there. Well, you have something attached that helps you and gives you some further direction titled, Board President, help me, what's it titled?
E-meetings, how to?
That's what I thought, okay. That's what I thought, thank you. E-meetings, viewing agenda for committees, work session, and board meetings. I believe some of the staff leads will have copies of agendas, but we're so encouraging everybody to access all of the information. Staff is working hard, as they have always, to make sure all the information is uploaded for you there for your review, whether you are on that particular committee or not, so that you are prepared with the information, ready to ask questions if you have any, and we are prepared to answer those questions as we can. Board President.
Are there any questions of Dr. Friesen or the Commissioner on the process? I appreciate laying out a process. I think this really will help us move forward. I think it'll help us streamline some processes as we work through the new structure of the agenda and the continuing responsibility of committee chairs.
I'd just like to comment, I've been to a number of political entity board meetings, and sometimes you feel they're kind of greased, if you excuse that term, as far as everything's been determined in advance. The public doesn't feel like they have a lot of input, and I think what we've done here is really important, and it kind of goes in the opposite direction, really, is because, for instance, the Finance Committee, which John is now chair of, we're going to have a much greater opportunity to discuss a lot of the items that we end up approving here at the board. May not be quite as transparent to the individual watching, but I can assure you it's much more transparent, and there's much more of a critical sort of process where we can ask a lot of questions and get a lot of answers that, frankly, I'm not sure we were getting before. So I think this is a real step in the right direction, and I want to commend the Commissioner for his effort in doing this. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Dr. Friesen.
Certainly.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
She was doing so good. I thought she'd keep going, but no, actually, thank you to Dr. Friesen for doing that. And, in addition, it's really good for our staff to be able to go through that process, and it helps us serve you well and serve the public well. And so I appreciate the compliment, but I thank you for your efforts on that as well. So,
Commissioner, can I add just one comment to go along with the other discussion? It certainly empowers the committee members, committee chair, to really be on their subject matter when they come to the meeting. It better be right, because we're going to be held accountable, no doubt about it. Thank you.
And I'd just add to that it also provides a great deal more opportunity to hold not only the board, but the commissioner responsible for what is happening here. And that's really important. And so, again, I think we're moving in the right direction.
all right, so thanks, everyone. I guess the next part is my report is the consent agenda process. And again, that's one of those processes in which we encourage board members, if you do have any questions about consent agenda, if there's anything at all, we organize the staff to get you answers to those questions and do that in advance. And again, just fill out that pink form, and I believe we have a place over here now to put those pink forms. If you have any questions, we'll organize the proper staff to get that for you. So then next after that is our rules report. My computer went blank for me for a second there, so well, see, everyone's got one. See, on the e-meetings, you can actually find the report. There's only one thing listed on there, Rule 51. as you know, is around kind of our regulations for special education programs across the state. We just approved a hearing draft. I think the date of that hearing is coming up next week, yes. And so we'll move that forward. There'll be a hearing on that. I think our changes are somewhat in the routine nature on that front. But the other thing that's not on that particular report that I wanted to let you know, and it kind of was hot off the presses, but Rule 4, dealing with textbook loan, has been signed by the governor. So it becomes law, or I think the effective date was actually October 3rd. And so we're moving forward with that process. And so really, if you think of that, good work that you did, I guess you made that official in August, and we passed it on. The Attorney General and the Governor both approved that, and so here we move forward with that process as well. So, and I guess my final piece of the puzzle today is actually more of there's not so much an agenda item there that Donlin had mentioned that there's not maybe a lot of things, but I wanted to welcome Donlin back from she being gone and out for a little while, and is getting around well today, I would say. So welcome back, Donlin, from your events. So with that, I think that's all.
Okay, so no other report from Donlin, just what you
Yeah,
covered?
nothing else, right? So
Okay, all right, great. Item 4, we're moving to our standing and ad hoc committee reports. And the chair yields to the chair of the Teaching and Learning Domain Committee, Maureen Nichols.
Thank you, President Wise. The Teaching and Learning Domain Committee agenda included 1 action item on the Nebraska Physical Education Standards and 3 discussion items. 1 discussion item was related to the development of an assessment vision. Staff shared information on the continuing work developing the guiding principles of assessment. This draft will be shared with the Policy Committee. A second discussion item related to civics education, where the committee reviewed the letter from Senator Christ and the ongoing discussion related to this effort. Senator Christ is available to meet with the committee on November 4th, and we plan to meet with him at that time. Another discussion item related to an update on the ACT online prep. No action is related to this discussion, rather an update from last month. Valerie is going to share some additional information, and with that, Valerie, would you come up and join us? Oh, she left. Well, maybe if she comes
I
back,
can give
we'll...
a little bit of the update until we wait for Valerie. First of all, just again, thanks. We're moving forward on the process for with the contract in the middle of the process, making sure that we're able to provide on the online ACT preparation program for all students across the state that was able to fit within the action item that we had last time to approve that contract. I think that's really a good thing. If you remember right, they had provided that all students on free and reduced lunch, they would have provided that service for free for a pretty nominal amount of money on the contract overall. We're able to include that for all students. There's some net benefit to the state along those lines as far as how we're able to benefit instruction and data that help us really prepare our students for their best success on the ACT. So I'll turn back to Maureen if there's anything else.
Well, and I will go ahead and hand out a handout that we shared in our meeting on the guiding principles that you can all look over, that you'll learn more about. Valerie, is there anything that you would like to add?
I covered pretty well, Valerie, unless you had something.
I'm sorry, we're on a conference call.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's okay.
We have other things always happening too, so.
And I'll just pass these around for everyone to take a copy. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Flint, who's going to share a summary of the physical education standards with us. Glenn?
All right. Corey Epler presented an update on the Nebraska physical education standards, including a summary of the public input, which is positive. Overall, the public input supports the content and rigor of the standards. Minor edits were made to standards documents, which are presented in an updated version, which is going to be presented today. The committee recommends approval of the Nebraska Physical Education Standards, and Corey will now share a summary of those updates from last month.
Thanks, Maureen, and thanks, Glenn. For the record, Corey Epler, Senior Administrator for Teaching and Learning. Jelaine Hill, our Physical Education Specialist, is traveling back from a national meeting today, so she'll be here tomorrow. She's not able to be here. The documents that I handed to you are uploaded in e-meetings. The first is just a one-page summary sheet of the public input that we received through the survey. In addition to the one page that I printed for you, there's additional data, quantitative data provided in e-meetings as well in relationship to the public input. So survey data was collected from about 231 respondents on the physical education standards, and for the most part, as Glenn indicated, we had very high percentage that reflected that the proposed draft reflected the essential knowledge and skills needed for physical education in Nebraska classrooms. Over approximately 87% felt that the PE standards provided clear and specific learning targets, and over 85% indicated that the standards were rigorous and encouraged advanced skill development. As far as who were the people completing the survey, over 83% indicated their role was as an educator or an administrator. We did have 6.2% identify as a community member or parent. Still really low, but getting better. The other thing I included in the appendix was a list of the organizations that we reached out to share with their stakeholders and constituents. You can see that we really tried hard to reach out to a broad group of community, state, and national organizations for input on the standards. The qualitative data that we collected, there's just a few key themes that emerged from the data. Those are listed on the bottom of the one-page summary, and again, that's posted in e-meetings. I did also go ahead and provide two letters that were offered as public comment for the committee that the commissioner asked me to go ahead and share that with you all today. We do have some folks that will be speaking tomorrow on behalf, but these were two individuals who were not able to join us tomorrow, but they did want to offer their thoughts relative to the proposed standards.
Are there any questions from board members for either Corey or for Glenn? John?
I would just like to say I got to compliment Corey and his team in regards to fighting for feedback for these PE standards. I mean, you guys went above and beyond in regards to speaking with all stakeholders, all schools, all citizens as much as possible. In many cases, I received feedback from schools thanking me for the opportunity to participate with the survey and the review. So thank you, Corey, for all that you've done.
Thank you.
I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, you turned over every stone possible to get any type of feedback. Also, it's pretty obvious to everybody in this room in the state that we have an epidemic of obesity and diabetes in our state. And hopefully this is a rigorous enough program to counter some of the challenges that we're facing. So thank you, Corey.
Thanks.
I obviously had some concerns last time about parental input on math, and I suspect that this is not as glitzy a subject for some as maybe math was, although I think your parental input may have improved here. And I don't want to diminish what you've done, but I really think we've got to find additional ways to get more parental input on our standards. Obviously, you'd expect educators and those involved in that community to be inputting on this, but it just seems to me that somehow we've got to do an even better job of reaching out and getting more parents involved in commenting on these standards in some way or another. Mm-hmm. So appreciate what you've done, but I'd encourage you as we go forward, let's just keep trying to improve this this response by parents, please.
Thank you.
Corey, I would just like to add, in conjunction with Patrick's, I receive a monthly newsletter from the districts in Merritt County of what's going on in their school, between the lunch calendar to the principal's reports and whatnot. And perhaps this might be an opportunity, Commissioner, for us to reach out to the administrators that are producing these newsletters to say, hey, the PE standards are online. We very much encourage you as parents to become involved. To me, that seems like the closest step in reaching our parents. Just a thought.
Great, thank you.
Lily.
I concur with that. In the Lincoln schools, they have these newsletters for each individual school, the PTAs, the PTOs, going directly to them, asking. They're always looking for somebody to present a program. Hey, they would welcome you with open arms with coming to do these presentations. So perhaps it is time sensitive though too, and also the time of day. It would be in the evenings. It's not during business hours. So maybe it's something that as board members could help with that, to go to their own school districts with the information too, to take the load, to share the load with you.
Good idea. Thank
Lily,
you.
I agree with you for each of us as board members in our districts to take partial accountability for getting the information out to our board administrators. It's a good piece of networking and checking in with them as well.
It might just go as far as with each set of standards or that we revise, having a letter from the commissioner directly to the superintendent of the district, asking them to do more, to get more parental input and more input. And that wouldn't take, it takes a little postage.
But I think even what we do to communicate with, I don't think we've been intentional about asking schools to gain information from their parents. So actually, I think it's a good point. I know that also Dr. Epler and team was kind of working on what's a more kind of general public format to get real engagement. And I know we talked about that a bit in the committee, and I think that's also an important thing for us to keep developing, because you read the education ease, so to say, and a lot of folks probably go, oh, I don't know that I can have an opinion on that. The reality is I think there's some ways that I know our team's already working on to think about how we reach out to parents and the general public in a kind of a friendly format that would encourage their participation.
Thank you, Corey.
Thanks. See you tomorrow.
Okay. With that, in terms of the discussion item related to the proposed revisions to the Nebraska Career and Technical Education Standards, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn again.
Okay. Ryan Ford presented the proposed revisions to the Career and Technical Education Standards, including public input. Jackie Garrison was present to answer questions related to the Communication Information Systems career field, which was of particular interest to me, and it looks like a really good program. This will be on the agenda for the November board meeting as an action item. Ryan will share a summary of the documents presented, and Jackie is present to answer your questions.
Again, I'm Ryan Four. I serve as the Deputy State Director for Nebraska Career Education, and with me is Jackie Garrison, who's the Career Field Specialist for Communication and Information Systems. Two other staff members who have worked on this effort are Carol Ringenberg, who's our Specialist for Education and Training, and Allison Kreifels, who is our Specialist for Family and Consumer Sciences, sometimes referred to as Human Sciences. In a moment, I'm going to share with those of you who were not in the Teaching and Learning Committee the paper copies of what's available to you in e-meetings. Nebraska Career Education is made up of 6 career field areas. So communication and information systems, for example, is one of those career field areas. Human sciences and education is another one of those career field areas. If you wanted to expand that out, agriculture is part of that, business, marketing, and management. And so over the course of this last year, we've engaged in standards review and revision in communication and information systems and human sciences and education. And you'll note that we've separated out in human sciences and education the human services, which is family and consumer sciences, and education and training, because of some differing natures of those as they show up in coursework and programs and in schools. So as we're taking a look at these standards, we're looking at high school or secondary standards, and I think that's an important note, one that perhaps we didn't capture in the committee, that's different from the physical education standards, for example. I mentioned we started this process about a year ago by engaging business and industry stakeholders and post-secondary educators, along with secondary educators, to determine what students should know and be able to do in each of these areas. And then we engaged teams of secondary and post-secondary educators to write the standards in each of these areas. These have gone out for public comment already and are still in draft form. There's a month still before they come back to you as an action item. And so I'll pass the paper copies of these out and walk through what the documents are. So the first document that you see are the standards and indicators for the communication and information systems career field area, and they're sub-clipped as well. There's a lot of them there. These are organized by programs of study, and so there are multiple programs of study within communication and information systems. Behind that document is a one-page document that gives you a high-level overview of what those programs of study are and what the courses would look like in those programs of study. And then behind that one-page document is a summary of public feedback related to each of those programs of study. And so we asked 3 questions and some additional questions for qualitative feedback. And you see there the level of agreement with each of those 3 questions. Behind that then are the standards and indicators for the family and consumer science or human sciences programs of study. Again, organized by each of those program of study areas. Behind that then is an overview of the programs of study and what they would look like in courses. And then following that is the summary of public input for human sciences or family and consumer sciences. And then the last set of documents are the standards and indicators for the education and training program of study and the public input summary for education and training.
I have a quick question, Ryan, of clarification. You said there's a survey still out there for public input, correct?
We kept that survey open from September 1st to September 15th, and we are still accepting feedback. That survey is closed, and we can think if that needs to change. We did it different than we did for the physical education standards, and I recognize that.
Mm-hmm. So the link is still open?
It's not right now.
It's not, okay. All right. Any other questions to Corey and Jackie regarding this? John?
I think this is great in regards to, it looks like we're implementing more of computer science and programming with our standards, which is very, very much asked for and needed around the state. There's no doubt about it. Other states are really moving ahead with a lot of their computer science courses in the classrooms, and it looks like Nebraska is right there with them right now. Is that correct?
I'll let Jackie speak more to that.
Yes, we were intentional about trying to bring that in. We had programming before, and so we just brought in some more of that computer science using the National Computer Science Frameworks as a guide to implement those within our programs of study.
Okay, that's outstanding. Did you build a consensus from the schools in regards to building this? Feedback?
We looked at what courses were currently being offered, and then we took the input from business and industry during our
Good.
December meeting to plan out the programs of study that we were going to use.
I got to ask this question. Are any of these courses planned to be dual credit?
Yes. We're working with the post-secondary schools in the state to see what we can do to bring in the dual credit as like a capstone course within the programs of study.
And do any of these equate to maybe if you will, a primer for certificates?
We haven't gotten that far, but we're in the process of working through those things.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Any other questions? Molly?
I just want to compliment you on your programs of study to also include not just human sciences and education, but education and training program. I was a little bit shocked when I heard that our teacher applicants are down 40%. And I commend you for building career pathways in education, because as the baby boomers retire and we're having lower applications, we're going to need these qualified, certified teachers. Thank you.
Any other board members? Lily?
Question in regard to the computer classes, and what is the relationship to the mandated or the offering in math courses? My understanding, it does not replace mathematics, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll jump in here if that's okay. Currently, the endorsement listed for computer science courses does include mathematics, so a school would be able to offer that course and have a math teacher teach it and offer it as a mathematics credit. And moving forward, that will continue, especially as we get into the advanced placement computer science and Project Lead the Way.
So you're telling me that a student could be taking this and not taking the math classes?
What that means is a local school could offer a computer science course and allow a student to earn mathematics credit in that particular course if they so wish.
And so when a student does that and they apply to the university, what is the outcome? And I'm hitting what's a very important topic to myself.
I believe the university does not count computer science as a mathematics credit.
And I think it's important for folks to understand that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the team? Are there any questions for the Teaching and Learning Domain Committee? Rachel?
I do have a question.
Well, make
Madam
sure we can
Chair.
answer it.
Madam Chair of the committee, I just would like to take a second, if it's agreeable, to potentially have a few minutes of a discussion on the ACT online prep in a little more detail. One of the things at committee that was discussed, and I think so eloquently described by Valerie, was a little bit about what that resource provides and why it's important for us to think about it instead of our original thoughts of just for students with free and reduced lunch, but to open that for all students. I really think that was a very robust conversation at a committee level that would be beneficial to the board as a whole.
So would you like Valerie to come back up? Valerie?
What this
You're not
means
getting
is,
out of
What
this.
this means is, Valerie, I did not cover it all.
I didn't want to put it that way. I was trying.
No, that's good.
I'm Valerie Foy, I'm Director of Statewide Assessment and Accountability. And the document that I have shared with you covers the major details of the ACT online prep. So when we wrote the RFP for a college entrance exam, we included that we wanted the company to offer a preparation, and we wanted it to be a significant online preparation, meaning that it couldn't just be a few practice items, to our free and reduced lunch students, because there was some concern in moving to a college entrance exam that the students who might be at risk would be placed even more at risk because they may not be able to engage in some of the preparation classes that are offered for ACT that are typically paid for by families. So we asked for it, and it was given to us for all of our free and reduced lunch students in the state. And it's called ACT Online Prep. It's a fairly new program. And when we discussed the ACT contract last month, we didn't discuss this because we hadn't seen a demo of it, and I wanted to see what it was. And we have since seen a demonstration of it, and the discussion here is based around the adding this for our non-free and reduced lunch students. So every student in 11th grade who will be participating in the ACT would have the opportunity to take this AOP, ACT Online Prep, and it would be within the context of this contract. So in looking at the demonstration of it, the reason, and this was a very team-oriented, the entire assessment team saw this and then gave input into this recommendation. And so in the program, the students would have this available to them in November, so it'll all be set up. Students will already be entered into the system, will receive a password to go into it, and when they enter it, they can put in their expected test date. They can take an ACT practice test, and from that, the online system will set goals for them, and then will measure how how quickly they are reaching those goals. There are really great graphics in it. These circles, like here's where you are, you're 20% to meeting your goal on mathematics, and so this is how much, and then if they do more. And the system is very instructional. It doesn't just have practice tests by any means. It has items, we saw a math one in particular, but it has them in all the subject areas where the student takes the item, gives their best answer, and then the system turns around and explains, this is the correct answer, here's the mathematical calculation behind that, and why this is. And so it's a very instructional system. Students can continue to take practice items, and the system will constantly update on how they are at reaching their goals. And within the system, not only that, and on the writing test, so we're doing the ACT writing at 11th grade. When the students take a practice test in the system, it's AI scored to match the scoring that would take place when our students actually do the real one, even though that is human scored. They've trained the computers to think like humans. Okay. And so, but I think that's a great piece. And so it constantly updates it. There are vocabulary flashcards, and I asked ACT, I was like, vocabulary flashcards, do kids do these? And they're like, they really do. And because it's electronic, and so they go in and they play with these electronic flashcards that are ACT-oriented vocabulary, but ACT-oriented vocabulary means college and career-ready vocabulary. So, and then the students actually set goals within the system, and it measures how they are at reaching their goals. The students are also able to enter into the system their confidence about standards about learning in math, science, reading, in the different strands of the ACT test. And so the information can be very robust that is provided about how confident students feel about fractions, if that's what the topic is that's being assessed. And then finally, by adding this for every student in the state, if we had had it just for free and reduced lunch, the data from the system did not feed into schools, districts, and into the state. So we like this system because we feel it really fits under a lot of tenets in individualized learning, student self-motivation, and pieces like that. However, we also really, when we saw what it could do for the state in informing us about students' confidence on the learning targets and about providing items of strength and weakness on the learning targets for ACT, we felt that was a really strong component of the ACT online prep. So it's named ACT online prep, but we feel it's a very instructional and motivating program.
Molly?
Valerie, I have two questions. The first one is, it says the program determines a plan of study for the student partitioned over time. So they're able to access 2 full ACT tests. In this plan of study, does the plan of study also include resources that the child could independently study on his or her own?
Yeah, well, yes, it does direct them to. Now, Molly, the only thing I want to say is I don't know if it sends them outside the system to resources, but it provides them resources.
Yeah, okay, and then the second question, let's say I'm a student at North Platte High School and I know I can access 2 full ACT tests. I'd probably want to take it earlier in my 11th grade year before that test is actually given. Can I do that at home on my own computer? Are these under the guidance of a
No,
school?
the students can individually
so they
access
could go to,
these.
and if they don't have access, they could go to a library and take it and they just enter their student identifying number and get their plan of study. So it is very personalized and self-motivated.
Yes.
And not mandated, but available.
Yes.
Thank you. That's answered all my questions.
Lily?
You made reference many times right now about the different parts that are tested in the ACT, including the math section. And so what are those courses that a student would need to take to be the best prepared for taking the ACT? And if you don't have the answer to that at this point, next meeting's fine too.
I can in general answer that, but I'll get more specific information, because if you want the names of the math classes, I have to go get John Moon for that.
Yeah, well, and I realized I'm catching you without having, but you have mentioned it's because of your frequent reference to that being a major part of the ACT, so by all rights, students need to know which classes do I need to make sure that I take in high school in mathematics that will be covered on the ACT. Okay?
Patrick?
Just, I think this is a really admirable effort, and I think it's great that we're doing this. I think this goes to something I've said earlier, though, and that's that, you know, we're seeing our citizens across state pay more taxes. We're seeing fights over TIOSA and property taxes. And here, we're actually going to save some parents $40-some. It may sound trite, but it's something that this board is doing that does have an impact across the state on our citizens. And I just think it's important to note that, because the feeling is there's not enough being done on these efforts, and this is really an important effort, and it's particularly for those disadvantaged children that are going to get this opportunity, you know, that might not have had this opportunity to begin with. So I think this is just, I can't tell you how important I think this is, and I appreciate your work and the commissioners and the departments.
John? Or Glenn, I'm sorry. John?
Well, I wanted to follow on to Pat's comments that this is really very cool, and it's really personalized instruction through competency-based education. You take the test, we build you a study plan, you move as fast as you want to. If the teacher will get the information, if they see students are getting stuck in an area, they can talk to the student about that, either as a whole class or individually. And beyond saving $40 for the test prep, you could earn thousands of dollars in scholarship money if you can increase your ACT score. So I think it's going to be a huge benefit for students and parents.
John?
Thanks, Mo. Well, I just got one quick question. I just was wondering, the fourth bullet point down on the ALP, it says the 2 writing tests provide a return artificial intelligence scores for each to the student. Layman's terms, what does that mean?
Okay. So the student will write an essay, and that essay will go into a computer scoring. So artificial intelligence are computer programs that are trained to score in the same way that humans do. And so when test companies are training their AI computer programs, they keep running them against their human scorers. So there's a long time in which every AI score is accompanied by a human score until they have an extremely high agreement, or if they don't exactly agree, they're within a point of each other, to determine that, or to be able to efficiently and effectively quickly return results to a student.
Understand.
So if we had to pay for human scorers on this, it would be an extremely expensive program. But they took a front loading of expense in developing a computer program. It's very widely used, becoming more popular. But again, I do want to say that the actual ACT tests are 2 human scorers.
Okay. So it does help with efficiency, cost, and, if you will, quickness of the results.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Well, I think we've had some great discussion here with our groups, and I want to thank all of you for your input and your questions. Thank you, Valerie.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
seeing no further questions, I'm going to turn this back to President Wise.
Thank you, Maureen. Next, I'm really liking this job. Next, next we move to student success and access domain, and I will yield to Molly O'Halloran. So Molly?
All right, if you move to 4.2 on your agenda, 4.2A is the first item we discussed, and it was to adopt proposed revisions to Rule 2, Uniform System of Accounting for Nebraska Public School Districts. We wanted to make sure that the rule is aligned with the statute, and in doing so, we're going to broaden the definition of the term function to avoid future changes in different types of functions. And Bryce Wilson is in the room if you have any questions. We have a second action item that Bryce is also going to be discussing, and this is to 4.2B, is to adopt proposed revisions to Rule 8. This is the regulations for school finance and budgeting, state funding of educational service units, and learning communities. Again, it's kind of a cleanup. We're going to align the rule with the statute regarding community achievement plans and add a definition of open enrollment option student. This is something I didn't realize before the meeting today. We've all heard of option enrollment, so that's when your students can option out one time unless you move to another district. But open enrollment is a term used for the learning community. But because of recent statutory changes, as Bryce pointed out, if a student is in the learning community presently attending a school, at the end of next year they can stay in that building, but at the end of the building, then they need to become this new definition, open enrollment option student. And at that time, they have to go through the same procedures as option enrollment. There was no opposition in the public hearing. Before we go on to the next action item, I think it would be a good time for me to say, do you have any questions of our financial genius, Bryce Wilson? All right, they may ask you later, Bryce. Okay, we'll go on now to action item 4.23. Grant the commissioner the authority to approve a contract with the University of Nebraska for coaching and training services for Step Up to Quality. Again, in regard to this, I want to thank Pat Tim. This is her tenant, but she said just to go ahead and present it. What this actually is doing is, and Melody Hobson is in the room, it has to do with Step Up to Quality. It's those local early childhood in the home situations to step up to quality. So those early childhood are going to get the same kind of developmentally appropriate, high quality early childhood care. And then with these training services, Federal Part B 619 money will add 2 coaches for Step Up to Quality that will be available. Does anyone have a question of Melody Hobson in regard to this action item? All right, we'll now go on to our next action item. This is 4.2D, grant the commissioner the authority to approve a contract with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Child, Youth, and Family Studies to assist NDE with developing and delivering trainings and technical assistance. Zainab is in the room. I think, yes, here she is. Zainab is doing an outstanding job creating partnerships in this Student Success and Access Committee and domain. It will expand and enhance online training programs that incorporate and implement the 2015 Dietary Guidelines for Americans and CACFP new meal pattern requirements at child care facilities. This is where that early childhood behaviors happen when obesity begins to develop, and also there will be a parental component to provide a comprehensive nutrition education program for these children via environmental approach to, it's like a family dinner, to improve nutrition and physical activity related policies, behaviorals, and practice at child care facilities. And it goes right in alignment with our new PE standards, so the kids, our students, will be starting early. And then we are going to also, besides the dining, child care providers will conduct social marketing efforts targeting to support low-income families. We'll also establish a grant impact assessment to see the effectiveness of team nutrition grant projects. This includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. I think sometimes people see in recipients of SNAP and wonder if they understand the nutrition guidelines. So we're going to make sure we provide the support for the people in GO, NAP, SACC, sorry for the acronyms, Family Style Dining, Eat, Play, Grow, and the impact of all these early nutrition programs. And the source of the funding is from Nutritional Service, USDA Team Nutrition Grant 2016-19, really focusing on early childhood. So back to this whole item about contracting with UNL and the Youth and Family Studies. Does anyone have any question about the trainings and technical assistance for early childhood? Zainab, thank you so much. If there are no other questions, there was one discussion item that is currently before the board, and I'm going to turn it over to John Witzel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Molly. In regards to the transition tenant, we were very fortunate in the last few days to have, if you will, operations by Rich Cott, Corey Epler, and Cindy in regards to the stakeholder engagement for career technical education. They have been expanding the state in regards to a lot of travel, a lot of meetings in regards to building stakeholder consensus and information out regarding career technical education. Rich is so far and his team have had 6 meetings, and they've got 4 more planned in the future. And at these meetings, just give you a basis for what they involve in, invitations are sent out to school administrators, teachers, business people, local community leaders to participate in regards to what they view is needed in their communities. if you will, what their advantages are, what their challenges are in regards to establishing career technical education programs and industries, businesses, companies that need trained workers. So they have been, if you will, traveling the state, gaining feedback, with the enthusiasm just exploding in regards to the amount of people wanting more and more information. The more they go on the road, the more they get requests for more information. So they've got 4 more to go, and thank you very much, Rich Cotton and his team. Thank you, Molly.
And as I turn this over to back to you, I do want to focus right now for a moment on Jolene Palmer. Jolene, thank you so much for being the staff assistant. Very excellent support and communication.
Thank you, Molly. Next item is item 3, and it says Evaluation Committee. That's technically the Commissioner Appraisal Committee, and John Witzel chairs that committee this year. So, John, do you have any reports for us?
Thank you, Rachel. I've got to appreciate the team that I'm with in regards to Rachel Wise and Lily Larson. Thank you very much. At this stage, we're just basically collecting inputs from the board amongst their personal appraisals for this commissioner. And that's the stage we are at right now, compiling those appraisal inputs. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 4, Policy Committee. Pat Tim chairs that committee, so I'll yield to.
Thank you. The policy committee members met today and approved the minutes of the August meeting. And we have started this conversation a month ago and are going to continue it around a lot of our other policy discussions that are going on. We have a policy B8 that talks about defining policy and position statements and bylaws and rules. And there needs to be some definition among those, because as we look at our G policies, which are our general education policies, we're seeing that some of those policies are more of a position statement rather than being, as we call, a rule. Now, certainly things within policy, such as the direction to the board as to the things that we can do and those things like that are our policy. But we're going to spend time around particularly our G policies in looking at how we want to define those. There is a 4-year review of Board Policy G7, which is expanded learning opportunities. We have directed this policy to go back to the appropriate NDE staff to research and develop a framework, and then in November bring in a recommendation to the domain and possibly then to the board. We're doing a 4-year review of Policy D6. This deals with contracts and grants and purchases, and because of the fact that we now have a Finance Committee, we are directing that policy to be reviewed by the Budget and Finance Committee, and would ask that they report back on that in November. G19 is our standard assessment and accountability policy. That is all that one big long word that I have problems with. And we're going to allow that to sunset. And then there will be discussion on, right now, standards as a separate position and assessment as a separate position. And then as we will then move into accountability. And again, we will have input from staff. Something that we want the board to do is we have B5 policy, which is one of our bylaws, that talks about board committees. And I want you to take this with you and look at it. And it describes what the legislative committee does, what the commissioner's appraisal committee does, and so on. We want you to look at that in your capacity as a committee member and decide whether or not that needs any changes and then bring it back. And I'm going to suggest that if you do have suggestions for changes, it be given to Brenda in legal counsel. And then she'll take care of presenting it to me. An example would be that we are, with the Budget and Finance Committee, the Policy Committee itself has always reviewed the NDE trust funds. And the trust funds that we have right now are the trust funds that have been given to the Nebraska School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And we always approve their budget. However, the fact that we now have a Finance Committee, we're suggesting that that maybe become a part of their description in what they do. So please look at that, and then please also look at your own committees that you sit on and see whether or not the description is appropriate. The other one, let's see, we've also discussed revisions to policy B8, which is policy development. And again, that's where a lot of our discussion is centering around, is it a policy, is it a rule, and we'll continue that discussion and talk about how we align that language with our strategic plan and AQuest. The last one, we do have up for review a general education policy, G6, which is virtual education. And we had a report on that today, but staff is looking at how other states handle virtual education and some of the things that they have in place. So they have asked to spend some more time in doing their research before they bring a recommendation to the committee. So, thank you. Any questions? All right.
No questions, great. We will take a short break. I did promise one of our board members who asked if we would have a break, and we will right before the legislative committee. So let's try to take about a 5-minute break and try to get back about 25 to 4. Thanks. State Board of Education will reconvene, and we're moving on to item 5, which is the Legislative Committee. And Lily Larson, I will yield to you as chair.
Thank you very much, President. The State Board Legislative Committee did meet this morning. It's comprised of Molly, John, and Glenn, and myself. And we discussed several different topics. We did not have any action items for today. The committee did discuss the enrollment option program and the possible changes to statutes at the request of board member Flint. That topic is so involved, has so many different parts to it, that we're going to continue talking about that and what some possible options, if there are, of ways to improve that. And it may be it's the best it can be, but we're going to look at it in depth. I would like to ask all the board members that if you have any possible state legislation that you would like our committee to consider, especially those bills that will be coming before the legislature and that you would like us on our agenda for the next board meeting, please submit your request by October 20th so that we can make sure that it's there in plenty of time with proper information. So are there any questions for the Legislative Committee? Molly?
Lily, I know we wrote a letter to the United States Department of Education in regard to ESSA. Have we heard back from them about our plan?
That would be an excellent question for Brian Homestead to address.
I agree.
Good afternoon, Brian Halstead, Chief of Staff. I believe you're referencing the comments we made to the U.S. Department of Education on their proposed regulations for accountability and the consolidated state plan. We did submit those comments. They don't write back specifically to people on their comments. They will when they post the final regulations. In that posting, provide their analysis of comments and responses to those. So we'll have to wait until those get posted. The timeline for that is not set in stone. Most likely, we're not going to see the regulations for the accountability and the consolidated state plans until sometime around the holidays of Thanksgiving into early December. We also did submit a separate letter for some comments on the regulations regarding assessment. And again, we'll have to wait for them when they post the final regs, which probably is going to be December or January. So it will take some time before we know what ultimately happens on those two topics. There is one set of regulations out there right now on supplement, not supplant language. And we certainly are sitting down and analyzing that perspective and hope to submit comments by the deadline for those, which I believe is the end of November. So,
Are there any other questions, or did that answer what you wanted to know? Okay. Glenn?
One of the things we came up with this morning was possible change to the policy around appeals. Is this the appropriate forum to talk about that, suggest this policy change, or?
It's fine with me.
All right, well, I'll just go for that. So we were trying to streamline the appeal process, and one of the things we do is approve a hearing officer as a board. This causes a month delay before anything can actually happen, and there was some discussion about just letting the commissioner go ahead and approve the hearing, go forward, and then we'd review the findings, but that would eliminate at least a month's worth of delay from the process.
Commissioner, do you have a thought regarding this suggestion?
Well, first of all, it's fair game for a committee to hand off other work to other committees, right? We've done that. Number one, that's good. But actually, it's a great point. Part of that part of what we looked at from a staff level, said, hey, look, there are some things we could do internally that's not just a legislative issue, that's also in our policies and our practices. So I thank you for bringing that one forward. And, you know, I think it's something that we can go ahead and carry forward to make sure we get into the policy committee conversation to ensure we can improve that practice. So.
And I know we would be putting it in good hands, giving it to Pat, Tim, and policy. So- Well, and as I said, there is it's a very complicated matter. And so having two committees look at it, I think is worthwhile. Pat?
Excuse me, I don't sit on the legislative committee or the other committee that made the report earlier about the change in the learning community and the definition of option enrollment there. But I guess my question is that change going to create issues that, you know, beyond, or that really impact what this option enrollment? Is that change in the Omaha area going to have a major impact, or is it just you know, what's the impact, if any?
I don't know that we know the impact, but Brian, what's your insight?
Well, in the committee, we did produce for the committee members the numbers for students who have utilized the enrollment option program, and we also included in those numbers those who are doing open enrollment in the learning community, because in 2010-11, when open enrollment started there, guess what? The statewide numbers for option enrollment dipped. Well, that's because a large number of students in the metropolitan area no longer did enrollment option, they did open enrollment. This last legislative session, the legislature ended open enrollment in the learning community as a separate concept for the starting next school year for children to move within the school districts in that learning community. They will go back to using the enrollment option program. Any student who had started using open enrollment gets to continue open enrollment for that part of it. So we're going to have to track to see as to how that impacts numbers and the enrollment option program going forward.
I guess my question would be, was the option enrollment, former method in the learning community more flexible than what we're facing with the change? I mean, could a student opt to go to one school district this year and then next year choose to go to another and
No.
under the learning community program?
No, it would, again, under enrollment option, there is only one use of it unless you meet certain conditions.
Okay.
So, and in open enrollment, you could move at each school level, which is one of the exceptions under option enrollment. If you complete the highest grade in a school building under enrollment option, and you want to go somewhere else at the next school level, you can change districts. It allows you that next one. So again, we're going to have to watch to see how that works. I believe the concept is that it should not have an impact on any of the students or families in the learning community, their ability to use the program to move should they choose to use it. But again, we'll certainly be watching that, because if there is tweaks to the law to make sure that everybody is on the same playing field, that's certainly what I understand from this board. Equity needs to be in place for that, so we'll be watching that.
Thanks, I think you answered my question.
Rachel? Thank you. And I think this is an example of, as we move forward with transitioning and how we do a little bit of our business, if there are some key topics that we believe as a full board we should have a board discussion on, learn a little more about, have a discussion on, this might be one, the option enrollment, open enrollment, the transitions. I think it's important that you let the commissioner know, or Don Lynn, ahead of time, as we're not looking at trying to reduce our time in meeting, but maybe just reduce how we use some of our time. And so the intent will be to build a little more time on some topical issues that we want to better understand and that may influence decisions that we make in the direction that we go. And this is a good example of one of those topics. I'm sorry. And then I went back to and now I defer back to.
I was just going to say, for the board members that aren't on the legislative committee, if you go to the legislative committee meeting under e-meetings, there's a nifty noodle graph, bar graphs and charts that show all this information about option enrollment and open enrollment. And I thought that was very helpful. Thanks to the staff for preparing that for us.
And in
we should
view of
share
the
it.
fact that this seems to be a very hot topic or something of interest to the full board, information is provided to us for the board meeting next month. Please share it with all the board. So, are there any other questions? If not, I'll turn it back to President Weiss.
Thank you, Lily. Next item is data and continuous improvement, and it's the, I believe, kind of the final report of the ad hoc committee. And so with that, Glenn has chaired that ad hoc committee on, or excuse me, not that, I was thinking competency-based. It's still data and continuous improvement, and Glenn is still chairing that ad hoc committee. So, Glenn?
Right, so I'm going to invite Matt Hastings to come up and prepare his PowerPoint for us. The highlights while he's working on this are, we're coming up with 2016 as a transition year because we don't have our evidence-based analysis. Our nifty noodle super statistical model for EBA is not ready to go yet. And so we don't want to redo the ratings, but we do want to show schools progress that they're making on the raw classification. And so Matt and the team presented us with several options, and of course once you open it up to a committee to start redesigning your form, there's no end to that, but they finally came up with something I think looks really good, shows schools they're making progress in the raw scores, and explains why we're not ready to produce a new classification just yet. Take it away, Matt.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flint. We had a discussion, as was mentioned. And so I'll just highlight for you a summary of what that was and give you a example of the recommended performance progress report coming from the Data Continuous Improvement Committee. As you'll remember, last month as a discussion item, we talked about the logic behind the classification cycle and the reasoning behind that, including things like the current psychometric evaluation, which we're doing of the evidence-based analysis, considerations for giving schools time to make improvements before they're reclassified, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about the, remember the multiple years and the "you are here" sign and the little star that we put. So there's our the "you are here" sign. Now in the committee, what the committee ultimately adopted for recommendation was to utilize a performance progress report to highlight, specifically to highlight improvements for schools and districts over the past year. This particular recommendation was developed sort of taking into account the considerations of the timeline that we talked about again last month, but also specific feedback that we received from school districts who highlighted the point that they wanted to make sure that their schools were able to show, even if we didn't do a new classification, that they could still highlight the improvements that they were making in the process. And so we believe that we've created a prototype that can accommodate both of those ends of the spectrum, perhaps. So what we have here is a recommendation then where we retain the 2015 AQuest classification, but we produce a performance progress report that's designed specifically, again, to showcase improvements since 2015. And those would be around our raw classification metrics of status, improvement, growth, non-proficient students, participation, and graduation. Again, we'll be fielding the evidence-based analysis in the spring, so we don't have that particular component to include here. So this is a sample of the prototype after including feedback from the Data and Continuous Improvement Committee of what we would be presenting to schools, where on the left hand you'll see the information from the 2015 AQuest classification. On the right-hand side, we're presenting all of the information that we can in terms of performance progress there. You'll note that we highlighted specifically the gray area there because we want schools to know that there is no EBA yet this year, but that will be coming, but that will continue to be a core piece of the accountability model. One of the challenges here is that there are thresholds to meet in order to receive improvement, bumps up or down in the way the classification model was designed. And so a school can make significant progress, for example, in the area of non-proficiency or something like that. Make progress, but yet not year over year show that they have a bump, right? So just looking at whether or not you have no adjustment or a move up isn't enough to give them a sense of the improvement that they might make. So what we're attempting to do here with our gauges is ultimately show where within the range of each of these particular metrics a school could be at. And I want to just highlight again that this is a prototype that has included recommendations from the Data and Continuous Improvement Committee, but this certainly would not have to be set in stone, but it gives you a sense of the recommendation that's coming from the Data and Continuous Improvement.
I would just highlight one thing we added to be updated in spring 2017. If this is going to be shown at different school districts and there's a big crowd, that white is not easy to see.
Yes, yes.
The white in the bottom right square or rectangle, I would highlight that maybe in red or something that
Sure.
a person in the back row could actually read.
You bet.
Excellent.
Go ahead, John.
Quick question for you, sir. In regards to, say, this is going to be presented to the schools. We've had a few schools asking about this already. In regards to how will you be presenting it? Like open forums or?
The release of the performance progress report?
Yes.
We would follow the traditional format, conceivably being an online release,
Okay.
like we have in the past, with some sort of press communications about what would be coming out.
Okay. So there will be a heads up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Matt, I have a question. Are you looking for a motion today, or is this for tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I believe.
Okay. Very good. If there are no other questions, then thank you very much, Matt, for your work.
Thank you, Glenn. And Glenn, we'll continue. Item 7 is now the Competency-Based Education Ad Hoc Committee and the final report of that committee. So, Glenn, I'll continue to yield to you.
Invite Ryan to come forward, and I have, if I haven't lost them, the reports here to hand out. So this was a great committee. We had John Witzel, Rachel Wise, Pat Tim, and myself were the board members on the committee. Ryan Bohr, Rich Cott, Katie Beaver, Janine Tyler were staff people helping us. We toured several schools that were doing competency-based education. Iowa Big over in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They're doing a lot with competency-based education there. Some of the board members, John, myself, I don't remember anybody else, that went to the one in Baltimore when we were out there for
Yes.
the NASB. That was very neat. They had the entire district. They just moved on this at once, and they had huge buying power because they were buying 300,000 laptops, and they bought into it big. We toured some schools in Omaha that are doing that, Spring Lake Elementary and Liberty Elementary.
Yep, Liberty.
Westmont, we went to Westmont. That was all very good stuff. And so Nebraska right now is really not on the map for competency-based education, but Ryan has devised a plan here tied to the AQuest tenets that should get us to that point by 2018. We've convened a group of schools interested in pursuing more professional development, learning about competency-based education. And they've attended a couple of different sessions now at NDE, and I'm going to let Ryan add some more to that. And thank you so much.
So I think a key to note here is this is an information item. There's no action around this, and so there are some suggested recommendations from the ad hoc committee to the board, and including the commissioner there, in terms of where you want to see that work moving forward. I think a key part that's come out of this process over the last year is that we've really opened some doors for communication, particularly with the ESU Coordinating Council and post-secondary partners, including the state college system, the university, and the 6 community college districts around this. There's interest in this effort, and we'll continue to support competency-based education as a staff as we're directed to.
Go ahead, Molly.
I think on page, it doesn't have page numbers, the one that says resources and technical opportunity number 3, I wondered if you've had any conversations on the bottom bullet point on student success and access, provide local education agencies resources, technical assistance to afford students with personalized, timely, differentiated learning supports. I would ask you, I know that our domain is talking about building personalized learning plans and possibly even having an app that is consistent with a personalized learning plan. Wouldn't it also be an interesting component if that student decided to integrate competency-based education, that could also be part of the digital backpack or the application? Have you talked about that?
We haven't. Those connections to the AQuest tenants were an effort to show how there is so much connection between each of those tenants and competency-based education as an effort. So from my perspective, I think that'd certainly be an appropriate thing to take up in that committee.
At least to consider in management. And one other, I guess, correlating component would be if in fact we are going not to mandate competency-based learning, but provide it as an option, I think it would be good in the onset if we do build a digital backpack or personalized learning plan model, that competency-based education be integrated. And then also, when you talk, you're also in career tech education, I think it would be really cool. Seems to me that competency-based education would be very easily partnered with industry certification, because that is the ultimate in competency-based project learning. So, pardon me if I'm throwing this out, I'm not on your committee, but I think project-based learning, personalized learning plan, and will all be fused in the model if your team actually wants to do that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lily.
I absolutely think that Molly's right on in terms of that it's possible to partner with some other programs, and in particular with gifted programs and with the Nebraska gifted program. And that's a question I have eventually as to where does that fit now in the department, because it seems to me this is it's gifted education. And so I'm concerned that we have a place where this will be promoted in the department. So, thank you. Appreciate it. Good work.
Back to you, Molly.
I'm trying to follow our new, Dr. Freisen's here, so I'm trying to follow the new protocol. May I ask the commissioner a question? Okay, I think I'm supposed to ask him if I can talk to you. Is competency-based education, I know this is our study report, do you have any plans on incorporating this into AQuest as suggested and building with it some components that no longer are being, like our gifted program? That was a very good question. And also it goes to our students eligible for special education. I think competency-based learning would look a little different, but also appropriate.
Yeah, no, I think very much so. In fact, I think as we kind of take the report and digest it, where do we need to do certain levels of work with that? When we start thinking about policy work from the board level or in rural work from even like in a rural town, we're most interested obviously in seeing students be successful and move forward. How do we build a support system that's going to ensure that in a lot of different ways? But I think in one way that we start to really recognize that education's changing in a lot of fronts, expectations of what the experiences might look like and for different groups. But when you start to talk about competency, I think that's what the study committee essentially highlights is ultimately that's the end goal, not courses, right? Not that you have so many courses, but that you've developed competencies, and courses are actually a structure to hopefully get us to competency. And so it's an interesting moment in time for us to look at assessment and standards and building those things together. So it's obviously what the Dr. Four and the team with Dr. Epler are all working on teaching and learning, but it ties together so many components as you highlight.
Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you, Glenn. And I think that's what's really challenging of this particular ad hoc study committee. It could have gone on and on and on. And I think it's a part of this is really the discussion of how we think about innovation and transformation. And I think whether it be within each tenet, whether it be how we think interconnected, I think the purpose of this study and then the purpose of the report is to think about the opportunities that are presented for all the committees in different ways. And if we really want to move forward with competency-based education, I believe it's not necessarily about it fitting in one home, because it really crosses everybody's home, and it really starts to transform the work. And how do we transform the work around digital resources? How do we transform the work around personal learning? How do we transform the work around transitions? You know, if you really have a robust process of competency-based education, you may be having middle school students who are really progressing and accelerating. You may have some students that need more time. So I think that the approach that's been taken right now is a lot of work with schools and the discussion and the professional development, that a part of the transformation has to be having a statewide dialogue on competency-based education. So I think that where this committee has landed and ended is not the end of competency-based education, very much the beginning of the discussion and how all of the committee structures may be thinking about how to move forward with competency-based education. So, and I want to thank Glenn and the other members of the committee and the staff. I think it was really some robust discussions about how we think differently as it relates to competency-based education.
It seems like one subject matter we didn't talk about in regards to competency-based, which was always the 800-pound elephant in the room, was the rule change, a possible rule change that would have to associate itself with competency-based. And I think that bears, if you will.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Glenn. And I think John brought up a really important point that, you know, we have flexibility in a waiver in Rule 10, and we had a lot of discussion is should you lead by waiver? And I think we kind of landed that's probably not the best way to go. So on one hand, Rule 10 does not totally limit opportunities, but on the other hand, does it really help in that transformation? And so I think there's a lot of discussion around how we think about Rule 10 and minimums and how we really think about a regulatory environment around competency-based education. And that will be another pretty major topic of discussion at some point for some committee.
Just one last question. Have you talked about at all involving competency-based education and evidence-based analytics? Well, in other words, if you actually, as a district, choose, it would probably be local choice. If you choose to endorse and integrate competency-based education, wouldn't it be nice on a state level if we looked at our AQuest formula and our classification system and could have some robust incentives for districts, if they choose to do competency-based, get industry certification, have an enriched environment for their gifted. I don't know, maybe that's offline, but I'm thinking if you want to provide incentives, it should be related to our system, if we don't go the Rule 10 route. Did you think about that, or is
But,
that?
You know, I think Rachel kind of touched on that this is affecting all areas. And if we're truly competency-based, which we're measuring learning and not seat time, does a fourth grade NISA test make any sense? Because we may have students that are reading at the third grade level and doing math at a fifth grade level. Does it make sense to measure them with a fourth grade NISA test?
You're going on a whole different tangent.
Yeah, right. I mean, but you don't want to penalize them on their NISA score if they're doing competency-based and these students are not ready for that material yet. You know, you're not measuring anything meaningful at that point. Go ahead, John.
I find it an interesting point that the military has been using competency-based education for years, decades, and they find it very successful and efficient. And if I may add one other thing, that school that Glenn and I went to for competency-based, all the children there were using computers. That's all they knew was computers with the teacher. I asked one of the students, I said, do you prefer the computers versus a textbook? And the reply I got was, what is a textbook? So, thank you.
One thing that I thought was interesting, I don't know if I shared this with outside the committee, but there was a great paper, Promising State Policies for Personalized Learning. And maybe we can append that to the report or make that available to the other board members. There's good stuff in here, things to think about. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Glenn. Item 8 is strategic planning. The Strategic Planning Committee met yesterday afternoon. Thanks to Pat McPherson, and Lily Larson for your time yesterday afternoon. We at this point are not going to be releasing a draft. Our timeline will be to come back to the full board in November with a draft with input from the full board between November and December, and look at December ideally as that time frame for the adoption of the strategic plan. And in our discussion yesterday, and please, any of the committee members or commissioner, if I don't summarize this correctly, we really talked about there's kind of two elements of the plan. There's the strategic plan that would be what our board adopted plan is, and then there's an action or implementation plan that's all the work that would be done by the department. And we really believe that that plan is the implementation or action plan will be fluid, will be changing, and that's not a plan that we would adopt as a board. But the plan that we will adopt will then include those elements that, first of all, are wrapped around kind of three broad themes of accountability that look at agency accountability and what the processes of regulatory environment, interagency collaboration, data systems, those elements of the agency, a piece of accountability that's around service accountability that gets to the quality and success of the services that are provided, some of those being the direct services, for example, that we saw with vocational rehabilitation, that really then represents the entire agency. And the third prong of accountability is kind of a combination of district, school, student achievement accountability that are really important areas that we want to focus on. And those three levels of accountability still are wrapped around AQuest and the tenets of AQuest, but the goals of the tenets become goals as it relates to the Department of Education as opposed to kind of a school-directed goal. It becomes a department or an agency-directed goal. And then the performance indicators would fall into two categories. One category would be evidence-based indicators that may be things such as the completion of a revision of a rule or different processes that are completed. And then the other element would be your performance indicators that are quantitative indicators that may be monitoring the high school graduation rate for subgroups of students, as well as maybe looking at some tiered progress in that process, so that we're focusing on are our priority schools and needs improvement schools really starting to move forward, and how do we think about some of those kinds of metrics. So we had a lot of discussion on the goals and performance indicators yesterday, and what will be coming forward will be what are recommended as the priority performance indicators and goals, not necessarily sub-goals and additional performance indicators that are part of that implementation plan. So yesterday we had quite a bit of discussion of how that frames out, what that looks like, some of the initial recommendations by the department. They will be coming back. We will be meeting again sometime throughout this month and planning to come back with the draft recommendations to you in November. Committee members, anything else? Commissioner, did I capture that? I think, okay, please.
When we were talking about accountability and the three prongs, and we were talking about NDE and our services and so on, we also had in that discussion the accountability of the board and where our support. So you're not getting off the hook.
Thank you, Pat. We added a fourth leg and made a chair. I did forget that we went from a stool to a chair yesterday. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on to Finance Committee. John Witzel.
Thank you very much, Rachel. On behalf of the Budget and Finance Committee, Rachel Wise, Lily Larson, Patrick McPherson, and myself, John Witzel, I'd like to provide you some brief points that we considered prior to discussing the action items in our area of responsibility. Give you an example, some points of concern. Lily Larson, she voiced concerns regarding matching funds and the relationship to contracts and grants. Very valid question. Rachel Wise, much of the new finance board reporting maybe require a policy in the very near future. Also, much of the finance information will be enhanced with the possible new website that is being negotiated at this time and looked at. Make contracts and grants available for review to all schools and districts to review and look at on a 24-hour basis. Patrick McPherson recommended more summary of the RFP contract submissions and the reasons for the selection. I'll give you an example. Point of discussion was contracts under $50,000 in regards to we wanted to maybe provide more opportunities for those individuals to bid on those low-hanging fruit contracts that were under $50,000. That goes along with our goal of complete disclosure of contract actions and the effect on all schools, including private and homeschooling. All in all, it's for the common good of Nebraska. To go along with that, we'll go ahead and start with our action items. Our first action item is grant the Commissioner authority to approve a contract with Double Line Incorporated for IT support, services support. Bryce, can we, is there any questions from the board? Oh, I'm sorry.
Dean's not here, but.
Matt is actually talking, can answer most of the questions on this contract for Dean. Dean's out today, so.
Are there any questions? Please.
The contract is a contract for Level 4 technical support for the continued implementation and development of the Nebraska Data Dashboard, which you are all very familiar with, the Advisor Dashboard. That system was designed and developed with grant funds from the United States Department of Education, statewide longitudinal data system grant. These resources are to have available contract support for Level 4 catastrophic disaster support for the dashboard if necessary.
Thank you very much, and just to note, it was unanimous support from the committee for this action. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Four 9B, action item, grant the Commissioner the authority to approve an amendment for Analytic Able for the purpose of expanding the scope of psychometric review. Discussion, questions? In regards to that, again, unanimous support from the committee for this action item. Right, absolutely. 49C action item, grant the commissioner the authority to approve a contract with Phenom Blue for Phase 1 of website redesign and improvement. Discussion? Questions? Oh, thank you, Molly.
John, I think I found this very important because in redesigning the website, if this is going to be effective in a virtual presence, we need to make sure it is upgraded, because if it isn't upgraded, it isn't as interactive for those participants that choose to participate. And I'm just kind of wondering, with the web governance policies and procedures, is there a security level of who can access the website, to what extent they can interact with it?
I think we're going to get our answer.
Hi, Brent Gaswick, team lead for the network team, kind of chairing this up for the department. The web government system selection would help develop that. Whatever we select is our platform, the CMS system that we end up ultimately going with, which we have not decided yet. Inside of that, we will build those roles, those access roles, and have those types of things built in for control that we don't have, frankly, right now with things in the website. So that'll give us a lot more of that type of user and control, and people coming in and can have different types of access than what we don't have at this point.
And will it be, pardon me.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Will it be something that potentially could also involve student engagement?
You know, part of this phase 1 is to really take us and select what we want to do, kind of get the design spelled out a little bit. We talk about website. This is really bigger than that. This is about a system that impacts external clients. It really could impact the internal operations of the department. It could be custom built to have a part just for students. It could be customized for our K-12 partners, for our private partners. We could do a lot of that customization. I can't tell you that that's what's going to come out of it today, but in the work, we are going to try and find a solution that allows us that flexibility to do those things.
Thank you. I just think it's so important that whoever we get has the capability to develop a very interactive, robust website. Because if we're not thinking big, it also will affect the career tech. You guys are talking about careers that haven't been invented yet, and many of them, if we want to have global interaction with people, we need to have that robust website.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking it would be helpful to have like a schedule. I don't know how many phases there are, what deliverables are expected at each phase, or when it finally completes. So if we could get a schedule attached to some of these projects, that would be helpful.
And the committee asked that today too, and we'll definitely try and give you that more drawn out part. Part of the issue that we run into is we don't know how many phases for sure it'll take. It'll really depend on what the decisions that are made during each of the phases. The reason why we are doing it in a phased approach and coming to you at phases instead of just an overall contract is we really wanted it to have the flexibility that while we've worked with Phenom Blue up to this point, we have the flexibility that at phase 2 that maybe we decide that there's another company that could better meet what the needs are of that next phase. So maybe a Firespring who said they couldn't do the bigger work that we asked for at the start could then come in and do some of the next phases. So that's partly why we have the phased approach. We can give you kind of what we think it might take and share that with you, but I, again, would say that it will be determined based on what happens at the end of each phase and what the deliverables are for that.
Thanks.
Rachel.
I'd just like to pick up on Molly's comments too, and I think from the discussion this morning, I think this is really exciting for creating that bigger piece. When we talk about transformational opportunities and we talk about what kinds of additional supports and resources that we actually can provide schools, this is going to be an example of that direction, because as Brent explained to us this morning as well, this is based on also creating some sort of content management part of the process, so that the content management may not be just about our traditional web content, but content that digital resources that really starts to create that digital repository of resources that can benefit teachers and students in Nebraska. And so I think it's really an exciting next step in that process as we move forward, not just with basically web design or redesign of the department pages, but really a transformational direction and philosophy of web presence and resources for schools and students and parents in Nebraska.
Anybody else? I'd like to say one other interesting point in regards to our current web services, if you will. We don't have literally our certified webmaster controlling our services right now. They appear to be a configuration of 75 independent entities just literally doing their own thing on our website. Is that correct, Brent?
Well, we have Shauna, who's done extensive training, Shauna Grunwald, who's kind of the webmaster and kind of helps oversee things. While she's not what you would call a web developer, she's not a programmer, she does help oversee kind of the training for the department. But you're right, the way we are set up right now, we have lots of different programs that are developing on their own that aren't true web developers, aren't trained for that, and there's no real checks and balances. So it's created some issues that we've had to deal with. And while we think they've done a very good job, and those staff members have done a great job, this will give us a chance to take away the programming side of it, and they can just be the content people and facilitate through, and we can have that true web developer presence.
Brent, and since we have you for a moment, and this website talk, I loved what you said about it being transformational. I mean, how many people go to the NDE website and not come back if you don't find what you need or it's too hard to navigate? So what I was also going to really request, John, would it be possible that you have some more part of the page that does hyperlink with our partners? I know that the ESU Coordinating Council does a lot with digital repository, Nebraska Association of School Boards, Nebraska State Education Association, Nebraska Council of School Administrators, the rural people, NERCSA. I just think if we have we don't have to reinvent the wheel if we can connect with their resources and make sure whatever you build that it is a collaborative effort of our partners in education. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Thank you, Brent.
Thanks.
We'll move on to 4.9D, action item grant the commission with the authority to accept the USDA Food and Nutrition Services FY 2015-16 direct certification.
Is your mic on?
Implementation grant. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, this was a unanimous approval by the committee members also. Last action item, 4.9E, action item, grant the commissioner the authority to submit the FY 2016-17 deficit budget request to the State Budget Division. Discussion, questions? Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my committee. Outstanding work. Thank you. Rachel, you got it.
Thank you, John. And thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the leadership of all of you in this process. I think that the new agenda is working well. For me personally, I think this is working really well. So thank you, Commissioner and Dr. Friesen, for making my job much easier. So with that, we are to item 5, adjournment. The regularly scheduled meeting of the State Board of Education will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in this room. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.